July 31st, 1978. The first time I visited that place, it was the summer of my 18th year. That makes it about 20 years ago. As I got off the helicopter, I remembered the sight of the swirling wind the helicopter blades whipped into the air. When viewed from above, the old mansion seemed quite normal. But when seen from the ground, there was something foreboding and unapproachable about it. Birkin, my junior by 2 years, seemed as usual to be only concerned with the document he was holding. We were assigned to the mansion 2 days earlier, on the day that the executive training center we had belonged to was closed. It all seemed like it was planned, too much of a coincidence. But probably the only person who knew the real truth was Spencer. Spencer was one of the main guys in charge of America's T-virus research at the Arklay Research Facility. As soon as we got off the helicopter, the head of the facility was standing in front of the elevator, ready to greet us. I can't even remember the guy's name. Who really cares about formalities and figureheads like him? From that day on, the Arklay Research Center was ours. As chief researchers, we were put completely in charge of all aspects of the facility. Of course, that is just how Spencer had planned it all out. He chose us. We ignored the facility head and got on the elevator. I had already memorized the building layout the day before, and Birkin, although he has no bad intentions, never really pays much attention to other people. Most people probably get pretty irked from the first 5 seconds that they meet us. However, the facility head had no reaction at all. But then, I was a young buck, completely full of himself, so I didn't really pay the facility head any mind. But in the end, I was really only Spencer's puppet, and the facility head, whose boss was Spencer, at least actually knew what Spencer was up to and what he was thinking. The whole time we were riding in the elevator, Birkin never took his eye off the documents he was holding. The document that Birkin was scrutinizing so closely was a report about a new virus that has shown up in Africa. It was called Ebola. At this moment, there were many people all throughout the world who were studying the Ebola virus. However, I think there were 2 major reasons why they were studying it: to help people and to kill them. As you probably know, the death rate of someone affected by Ebola is 90%. In 10 days, it quickly destroys a person's organs. Even now, there are known ways to prevent it or cure it. It could, quite possibly, destroy a large part of the human race. Of course, even before this, due to the Biological Weapons Prohibition Pact, it was illegal for us to study the virus as a weapon. However, even if we weren't the ones to research it, there was no proof that someone else wouldn't be doing that same thing. And so it was considered legal for us to research it, just in case. There is a thin line in international law between what is acceptable and what is prohibited. And so, it became necessary to research how the virus study information would be used as a method of prevention, not as a weapon. There really is no difference in the way in which you research a virus as a cure from how you research it as a weapon. But since the two are very similar, it is possible to pretend you are researching a cure, while in fact, be researching the virus as a weapon. Even though at that time, for whatever reason, Birkin may have been looking at the Ebola report, he wasn't really researching the Ebola virus. The Ebola virus had too many weak spots. First of all, the virus could only survive for a few days, if not inside a human body. It would soon die if under sunlight, ultraviolet light, for too long. Secondly, since it kills the host too quickly, there isn't enough time to infect other hosts. Finally, the virus is only transferable through direct touch, and so it can be easily prevented. Try to imagine the following. If a person who was heavily infected, the disease had spread all throughout their body, could actually stand and walk around, and without knowing it, was in direct contact with other people of their own accord. What if the RNA of the Ebola virus could actually alter a person's genetic code? And if, through that, a person was able to carry the virus without dying? What if this person had the resilience of a monster? That is, wouldn't this person be a living dead whose body carried the virus? Something that could infect others, sort of like a living biological weapon. I guess we are lucky that the Ebola virus doesn't have the potential to do such things. I wonder if we will be successful in holding out to such a virus without it getting into the wrong person's hands. The Arklay lab, headed up by Spencer, was built for that purpose, it seemed. To create a disease capable of the characteristics I listed before. Officially, it was just a pharmaceutical company researching cures to viruses. But the truth is, it was really a factory for manufacturing biological weapons. The origin of the company was to create new starter viruses by recombining genes. In order to produce biological weapons out of these new starter viruses, they began studying virus mutations in order to strengthen the basic viruses they had created. This was known as the T-virus experiment. RNA-based starter viruses can easily be mutated. Through those mutations, it is possible to strengthen their traits. The reason Birkin was so interested in the Ebola virus was that he was thinking of recombining the Ebola genes into a starter virus to strengthen its attributes. By the time we had arrived at the research center, there was already a sample of the Ebola virus waiting for us. We changed elevators several times, finally reached the upper level of the complex. When we arrived, even Birkin looked up. It was the first time we had met her. We hadn't heard a single word about her before. She was a secret of the utmost confidentiality at the research center, and they didn't let any information about her out of the compound. According to the records, she was at the research center from the very moment it was first built. She was 25. But we didn't know her name, nor why she was here. She was to be used as the experimental subject host for the T-virus. The day we began the experiment was November 10th, 1967. We did T-virus experiments on her for all of 11 years. Birkin mumbled something. Maybe they were words cursing our situation. Maybe they were words of praise. In any case, we had come to the point of no return now. We had two choices: to succeed in our research, or to lay here rotting like she was. Of course, that meant we really only had one choice. She was bound to a pipe bed, and something about her made me think, had this been a part of Spencer's plan all along? July 27th, 1981. Today, a 10-year-old girl was sent here as a chief researcher from Umbrella's Antarctica research facility. Her name was Alexia Ashford. I was 21. Birkin was 19. As annoying as it was, the whole Arklay complex was rampant with rumors of Antarctica Alexia. Nobody talked about anything else. She had been at Umbrella for a long time. The older guys at Umbrella knew the legendary Ashford name. Before we ever reached a dead end in our research, one of the old-timers would say, if only Professor Edward was still alive. If I remember correctly, Edward Ashford was one of the people who first discovered the starter virus and who originally planned creating the T-virus. However, he died soon after Umbrella was founded. It's been 13 years since his death, so is there really anything to gain by having high expectations of the Ashford lineage? And in fact, the Antarctic Research Center founded by his son hadn't yielded a single result. Don't people know the limits of Alexia's smarts? She is only Edward's grandchild, after all. But from the day she came, our worthless, good-for-nothing subordinates began to say, it's a good thing Alexia is here. She may be from a famous family, carry great genes within her, but nonetheless, I knew it was going to be a real hassle having subordinates with such a lack of good judgment. It's idiots like that who, if they accidentally stuck their foot in a bucket, wouldn't be able to move or figure out what to do unless someone told them. At least I could still tell the difference. However, if at that time I would have gotten upset about the whole thing, it would have just slowed down our progress on the T-virus research. Unless you can keep your cool and still be decisive no matter what the circumstances, then success will always evade you. At that time I was thinking this: by making good use of the past, then we could definitely yield good results. And if some of those old-timers, who feasibly could die at any second, then they would make great test subjects. After all, do you think it is possible to stand above the people if you can't rationally use their human resources well? However, the problem was Birkin. The way he reacted to the Alexia rumor was terrible. He never really said it, but for Birkin, the fact that he was the youngest person to ever be a chief researcher was always something he was proud of. That pride was severely injured by having a mere 10-year-old become a chief researcher. It was probably the first time someone so talented as he had ever tasted defeat. He just couldn't accept the younger girl of good lineage to be made a fool of by someone who hadn't gotten any results. Someone who had worked so far away. The fact that he couldn't get over it showed his immaturity. However, even though he was still immature, no matter what, I had to bring him back to his senses. It was during these 3 years that our research moved up to the second level. It was at this point that we fixed upon the idea of making a living biological weapon. We started to call the T-virus by a new name: zombie. However, it was impossible to get a 100% infection ratio. Within people, there is a subtle difference that the virus couldn't totally overtake. It seems compatibility was also a major factor. About 10% of the people who were injected with the zombie virus didn't get infected. And this was something that, no matter how hard we researched, we just couldn't overcome. A disease that would affect 90% of all humans seemed to me to be quite an effective weapon. But Spencer didn't see it that way. Spencer said he was hoping for a specialty virus that could easily wipe out everyone. But why in the world would he want something like that? One important characteristic of biological weapons was that they could be developed cheaply. However, the biological weapon that we were researching started to become very costly. If Spencer was in it just for the money, and he probably wouldn't have chosen to spend the extra money on researching a specialty virus that infected and wiped out 100% of its victims. It just wasn't financially worth it. Why would he want to ignore all financial concerns just to continue the research? If by changing the idea of war through biological warfare, he was attempting to monopolize all military industries, then I would have understood that. But even to this day, I have no idea what his true intentions were. But whatever Spencer's real reason was, Birkin was planning on making a biological weapon that would increase a country's military capacity, not to just manipulate the genes of the T-virus, but also by adding other genetic code. He was planning on creating him, a military biological weapon that could annihilate those who went unaffected by the virus, as well as people who were wearing antiviral gear and equipment. This weapon was later named Hunter. However, that experience was temporarily put on hold in order to protect the test subjects from Birkin. Birkin's pace was quickened by Alexia's existence. He began to act out of the ordinary. He would stay at the lab for 24 hours straight, attempt experiments that he hadn't really thought out. I tried to use other researchers to get as many samples from the subjects before they died, but I just couldn't keep up with his pace. The head facilitator brought in a new subject as if nothing had ever happened, but she too soon died. It was hell. And within that hell, there was but one person living. The female test subject's body that continued to live on. She was already 28 years old, having lived 14 of the years in this research facility. Someone whose consciousness had been taken away by the starter virus that had been injected into her 14 years ago. Someone who, if their heart did happen to actually be alive, would only hope for death, but she continued to survive. Why was only she able to survive this long? Her basic experiment data and that of other test subjects seemed to be the same. It would still take a long time for us to solve this riddle.